Welcome to the Home Recording Show. This is episode 320. I'm John Tidey, and I'm joined today by Scott, aka The Bunn, from the YouTube channel The Bunn and the show Baritone Obsessed. Welcome to the show.
Hello, John. Thank you for having me. I'm super stoked to be here.
And Ryan's unavailable today because he's doing a music video shoot, and they offered him a bunch of money. So unfortunately, he can't be here, and it's totally understandable.
Yeah, take the money.
The life of a professional production sound mixer. So today, the topic is baritone guitars, and I can't think of anyone more qualified to talk about baritone guitars than Scott. And we're talking about this not only because I've wanted to talk to Scott for so long and do an official interview, but also because I bought a baritone guitar myself. And yeah, it's an entirely new instrument. And you think that if you just play guitar, you play bass, bring in a baritone, it's no big deal, but it feels like a different instrument entirely. So what is a baritone guitar?
This is a very interesting topic because there's a lot of sort of conflict on the specifics of the definition and all that kind of stuff. Thinking about what is baritone first is probably the smartest thing to do. Not a baritone guitar, just baritone. What is baritone? It is a tuning range. It is a range of notes. And it is typically from C2 and down. And I guess somewhere around E, or I'm not sure exactly where the bass range starts officially. I think of it in terms of the bass guitar, but I think the bass range starts higher than the lowest note of the bass. That would seem logical to me. I've never actually looked into that specific detail. But the baritone range, it's actually a pretty narrow range, and it's this intermediary range of the lower register occupying that space between treble and bass in terms of the treble clef and the bass clef. And it overlaps both of those clefs. It's a tuning range. Just a regular guitar can be technically a baritone guitar just by tuning it lower. And that's where the arguments start. There's one camp that says if it's not a purpose-built baritone guitar to maximize the performance of the guitar for that particular tuning, then it's not officially a baritone guitar. But technically, like if it produces the sounds and the notes, it's a baritone guitar. But tuning a regular guitar down, there's a bunch of challenges, and we can get more into the challenges of it as we get along in the conversation. But yeah, the two sides are purpose-built baritones are baritones and nothing else is a baritone. And then the other side is it's a tuning range. And if you can make the notes on a regular guitar, then the guitar becomes a baritone specifically by purpose and intention of use. That's kind of what's going on in the baritone guitar arena. It's a big fight.
I didn't know that there was even an argument, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm indifferent about all of it. I see, merit or value in thinking about it from both perspectives. And I don't think it has to be so nailed down and so specific. I think it's really not worth giving it that much attention.
Right. So a normal 6-string electric guitar, you tune that down to like a C on the lowest string, then that's going to be pretty floppy most of the time. Going below that, it's definitely like too low. Tuning down to a B usually doesn't work. Then there's the 7-string option where you just add in another thicker string. And then there's the baritone option where it's tuned to a B on the lowest string by standard, and it is tight as hell with that B. And then you can tune it down again to G if you wanted. Yeah. And it's still quite, playable.
Yeah.
If we were to generalize a baritone guitar that's optimized, purpose-built, longer scale length, thicker strings, and less selection.
Yes.
Hang on, I'll pick up two similar guitars. So, two Uh, 6-string Telecasters.
That blacked out telly is really nice.
This is my go-to guitar, the Fender Aerodyne
Hmm.
Telecaster, and then this is my new Squire uh, Classic Vibe. I think it is baritone. It doesn't say baritone on it, but from the length of the neck, which it is hard to see, but if I line these up, they're super similar, but one is just like essentially like 1 or 2 frets longer.
Yeah. 2 inches, I think it's 27.5.
Yeah, it's a 27
Yeah.
inch or 27.5 inch scale length. And it feels totally different. And it's partly because I recently changed all my guitars from like heavy strings to light strings. And then I get this new guitar and it's pre-set up with heavy strings.
I'm not sure if you've experimented with this yet, but I do find a lot of the baritone guitars, they usually come shipping in B, and they usually have like 14 to 68 strings on them or something, some equivalent, something similar to that, which I've always found incredibly taut. It's so tight. And I think they could afford to use lighter strings, given that the scale length is increased. When you add scale length, you naturally get more tension. The scale length is a solve for a couple things. Like number one is that you don't have to increase the string gauge to an astronomical level to increase the tension. So you get a distribution of the upscaling of all of the things involved. So the scale length goes up a little bit, the string gauge goes up a little bit, the tuning goes down. Technically, if you have everything in line with, with the tuning, so let's say the target tuning is B, and you have appropriate amount of scale length, the appropriate string gauge in relationship to all of those things, then the guitar should technically ring out and sustain and have all that bright upper mids and all that kind of stuff, which is something you lose when you take a regular guitar and you put super beefy strings on it. There's a whole bunch of problems that come with doing that. Yeah, with the baritone thing, to achieve better low tuning, it's this relationship of a couple different variables. And the goal is for it to play with a character that is similar to what you're used to with a regular guitar, even though it is much lower and all of that. It's going to feel longer and all of that. But yeah, to maintain the sustain, maintain the tuning, and maintain the sort of rich character of what an electric guitar sounds like.
You were dead on with the gauge of strings. 68 to 14.
Have you tried lighter strings? I'm pretty
I haven't yet. Because I know that I need to take it in for a setup. It's a Squire, so there's some issues just right out of the box. But they include a free setup.
Right.
So I wanted to talk to you before anything.
Right.
Let's talk about the different tunings.
Yes.
I'm used to a drop D kind of setup on a guitar. So I've got, let's see if I can remember this. A, E, A, D, G sharp, no, F sharp. Let's try that again. A, E, A, D, F sharp, B.
There you go.
Is what I've got mine set up.
And
which
that's from low to high.
What's the standard B tuning?
It's really, other than the third string, it's really just E tuning with a B on the bottom and no E up top. So
there is a tuning without the F sharp. I think I see some people do G, C.
Yeah, they do. It's a version of a dadgad kind of thing, like an open tuning, but instead in G. One of the things about baritone guitars, at least at this point in history, is there is no standard anymore. It seems to be a very wide spectrum of tunings and applications. It became a very popular use instrument in heavy music. I'm sure influenced by Meshuggah and things like that. And even Meshuggah, when they started using the 8-string guitars, they were using what is it, 29.4 or 29.6 inch scale guitars. There were 8 strings, but they were also very baritone. They were very long scale. You know, if you play with the low tuning stuff enough, you realize that adding a string doesn't help anything. It's just adding a string. You could just add that string, that same heavy string, to a regular guitar, and it doesn't solve your problems. But anyway, this spectrum, it's so wide. There's so many tunings, and really, it seems to be 2 variations, like just a drop variation from C all the way down to another, like an octave lower C. There's a bunch of people doing this sort of bass 6 thing with these absurdly low tunings, like lower than a bass 6, lower than E1, going down to D1 or even C1. I don't know. I'm not that crazy, but people are doing it, and a lot of it is drop, but a lot of it is also standard. All my guitars are in a standard tuning, and I have a range of guitars that go from B standard all the way down to E1 standard, which is a bass 6 tuning. You can do it any way you want, and we're seeing a lot more people tuning, like experimenting with tuning and using like slide tunings and all these sorts of things. So that's, I don't know, the old guard of like it's this way or that way. It seems to be not necessarily dismantling, but kind of spreading out into lots of different ideas.
It's very interesting to go to just, you know, the whole guitar is like now in a different key.
Mm-hmm.
It's a key that was not achievable before with like deep low tuning. And it's interesting how it took so long for baritones to kind of get any popularity. Like really no one was making baritones for a really long time. 7 strings got really popular.
Mm-hmm.
You know, around the time I started playing guitar, Korn was like the biggest band in the world, and 7 strings was like what everyone wanted. And I guess it did achieve the thing of lower tuning, but also it was, you could play standard songs on it.
Right.
You know, anything, you know, all the history of guitar music, you could still play by omitting that low B string.
Right.
That's not really the case with baritones. It's made for making your own music, because there's not a lot of popular music that's written around baritone guitars.
Yeah,
really.
You could
not that I know.
Yeah, you could transpose.
I didn't get it with the intention to, you know, play my favorite songs on it, because I wouldn't be able to know which songs are written on baritone or not.
Those ABBA jams and you know, Bee Gees hits transposed.
So you mentioned bass 6 a while ago. As far as I know, Fender's the only company that makes a bass 6.
No, there's a lot of them. I would say that it's the most prolific of the long scale guitars. Like there are more options in the 30-inch. So bass 6s are typically 30 inches or longer. Occasionally, you'll see something in a 31.5 or a 32-inch scale, kind of like that intermediary bass scale. There are
so like short scale bass,
yeah,
has thick strings, has bass strings, and a bass 6 has a longer neck like a short scale bass.
Yeah,
but thin strings like guitar.
Yeah, and
right.
Yeah, they're still heavier.
Did I generalize that? It's still heavier than.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly what
it's still heavier than like a baritone would be.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the tuning.
So like if you take the thinnest string on a standard bass and then go extend that kind of ratio of lower or thinner strings from there, that would be kind of.
Yeah. The common string set for E tuning, like E1 standard on a bass 6 at 30 inches in scale, is like 84 to 24 or 24 to 84. I guess it's the proper way to talk about it.
84. That's still pretty huge.
It is pretty huge.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy.
I think I tried like a 72 as like the thickest string.
Yeah. This here is a bass 6. This is a Ibanez SRC 6, and it looks like a Soundgear bass, but it's actually a guitar.
I had a bass that looked just like
Yeah,
that.
very popular.
But this is so it's smaller. The body is smaller as well,
Yeah, the body
probably.
does seem smaller, but
Yeah.
it
And it's active pickups like
no, they're actually passive pickups with an
oh,
active preamp, and you
okay.
can bypass the preamp. Um,
And it seems like the bass six um, guitars tend to have more of like active EQs and things like that. You don't see that often on electric guitars. It's like active pickups or passive pickups. You don't see active preamps, things like that on guitars, but you see that a lot on basses. The experimentation with the electronic
yeah,
that happens with basses
yeah, this,
and the bass sixes.
yeah.
Like the design of them is it's for bass players. It's not for
I
guitars.
think the
It
target
seems like.
audience for this was definitely a looking for the bass audience, or the bass audience who wanted to expand their sort of sonic opportunities, their melodic
Yeah.
opportunities. But it does have like quite a bit in terms of the electronics. It's like a three-way EQ, and then a pickup selector and a master volume. It's an active EQ. If it's in middle position, it's zero, and it doesn't do anything. And you can run the battery totally dead or take the battery out and the guitar still functions. So the
Okay.
pickups themselves are passive pickups and they're quite nice. But this instrument was definitely kind of designed and marketed towards more of the bass crowd, but it really caught on at the end of its life cycle with the more metal guitar crowd. The EQ in it really, the guitar sounds best as in a guitar sort of use case, with none of the sort of EQ engaged. And the pickups are actually, they're kind of more of a bass pickup, but they sound amazing for that guitar. Not that they emphasize bass, they actually do quite the opposite. They are really bright and they have amazing upper mid content, which is a challenge typically in the lower tunings, especially if you're going really low. Hopefully, if you have enough scale length and light enough strings, the scale length allows you to try and get the string gauge down or string gauge at an equilibrium with the tuning and the scale length in order to, have those guitar characteristics in terms of the sonics. So it's a big dance. One of the things about doing this whole baritone obsessed video series, as well as having a Facebook group with a lot of people talking about what's going on, professing their woes and their experiments and their findings and all these sorts of things, is that a lot of folks really don't get the fact that like longer scale is always better. The more scale you can get, the better it's going to sound and perform, provided that you have enough reach. Some people are not comfortable with the reach. So if you have a really long scale instrument and the instrument isn't set up in such a way, so this, I'm really kind of flying all over here, but this is a great example of they compensated this instrument. It's 30 inches in scale. It's really long scale, but they put the bridge quite a ways back. So the guitar actually feels very compact. And this guitar transports in a regular gig bag, regular 25.5-inch scale gig bag. Not all super long scale instruments are uncomfortable to play, but a lot of them are if they're not
Yeah.
compensated or built correctly. So if you can get past that, longer scale is going to perform better, and you're going to be able to get better tonal characteristics because you're going to be able to afford to use lighter strings. So even though this is a bass 6 and 30 inches in scale tuned to E1 standard, I could set it up with way lighter strings and tune it to B, and it would do B like unbelievably. So you have this range of options with more scale length that it will perform really well at many of the intervals. Whereas with the shorter scale lengths, they start to fall off as you go down. And these days, a lot of people really want to go a lot lower than B. But suddenly, as you start going lower, it gets floppier, and the compensation for that is add string gauge, like up the string gauge.
Mm-hmm.
But with the string gauge comes a whole bunch of other problems. The tone gets dull, the intonation becomes a problem. The break angle is, you got to like really push the strings down because it,
Even just the playability is
yeah,
much worse.
yeah,
On that Squire, I really feel the gap between each string because each string is so thick and so tight.
yeah,
Light strings on a Telecaster, you can push right through it and not feel any resistance from the strings.
yeah.
So I'm probably going to go to much thinner strings on that. So we're on the topic of strings. What do you prefer for strings?
I tend to use the string calculators depending on the brand and tuning that I'm in. So I find Stringjoy has, D'Addario had a really good string calculator, and I used that for a long time, but I've been using Stringjoy strings a lot more lately, and I usually use their calculator. Even if I'm not using their strings, it's usually kind of close, but I try to use Stringjoy as much as possible. They sound really good. They last a long time. They're bright in the way that I like them to be.
Does it need to be branded baritone strings?
No, that's a beautiful thing about.
You can use standard electric guitar as long as they're long enough. I would imagine that a 30-inch scale guitar might require longer strings.
Yes.
Than especially if it's got a inline headstock.
Yeah.
It's probably very long.
I hear all the time. So I have one of those Jazzmaster Baritones, which is a 30-inch scale guitar, and most people get it to use it as a bass six.
Yep.
And I hear all the time, like every other week, I'll get a private message or of some kind, or there'll be some kind of post with me tagged. And they're like, strings won't fit. I'm like, well, yeah, you're just using off the shelf strings. Like, didn't you look like this guitar's really long? And like you say, it has the inline headstock. So, thankfully it's not a reverse headstock like the Sub-Zero. There is one bass six that's currently available, 30-inch scale baritone. I can't remember exactly which one, but the headstock's inverted, so the wound low string has to make it all the way to the end. One thing I've found though is you don't actually have to have the wind of the string go all the way to the peg.
I'm just looking at the local store website, and I searched for baritone strings, but just looking at it, none of them says what scale length it's for,
Right.
how long the strings are on the package. So you kind of have to know.
Generally, D'Addario is typically pretty long, consistently long. Ernie Ball is often long enough, but every now and again you'll get a short batch, like of regular guitar strings. It's not, Ernie Ball doesn't seem to have a consistent length, whereas D'Addario does seem to be very consistent in all aspects of their strings these days. And you can buy singles that are heavier than what come in their, whatchamacallit, their baritone sets, like up to 80 gauge with guitar ball ends. So I don't recommend using 80 gauge if you don't have to, because it's a pretty dead tone, unless you have enough scale length. Yeah, D'Addario is a safer bet when buying regular strings that are going to generally reach. Stringjoy arguably makes the longest consistent string option that I know of.
The short answer is no special strings are required, except in the case of
hopefully it's long
when your
enough.
guitar length is too long. Yeah. I ran into that with a bass once.
Right.
I had a PV 5-string, and the lowest string, I couldn't find something that fit for a while.
Right.
I had to get like extra long.
Did you have one of the grind basses? Because they were like 35 inches in scale.
I think it was.
That was a nice bass, by the way. That was.
I didn't keep it
sleeper
very long, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, 35 inches in scale. No one knows about them, but they sound. The pickups are nice. They play good, and they're longer scale, and they're great.
it was a huge bass. Really nice if you like the like mahogany, all wood sort of
Yeah.
look. Setting up a baritone guitar is basically the same as any other guitar, although with thick strings, I've seen you talk about this on your channel, the break angle is a little more important than normal.
Yeah. You need to make sure that the break angle, that the string comes off of the bridge and the nut. The string, when it comes out of the bridge, with thicker strings, even if you have a lot of scale length, the string gauge is just naturally a little bit thicker for these lower tunings and all that stuff.
Harder to bend.
Yeah. The natural force of the string, the tension of the string, isn't enough to get a clean break right off of the nut or off the saddle and the nut.
So you get kind of like a bump up,
Yeah,
instead of just like a 45 or 30-degree angle or anything.
yeah,
So it bumps up at the saddle or at the nut,
yeah,
rather than bending cleanly.
and it makes for massive tuning problems. So the solution to it is just when you restring, like really push it down and make sure that it's coming off on a clean angle, and it resolves a huge amount of problems. Heavier your strings are, the more susceptible it is to that. Another thing actually about in terms of setups and heavy strings and whatnot. So if you're going for a tuning on a short scale length with a really heavy string, you're attempting to compensate with a really heavy string, and you're trying to set it up, and you're pushing the break angle down and everything, and you just can't get the intonation to work. Part of that is it's not the distribution of the notes for the length and the pitch are just not like a distribution of frets for the length of
Right.
all that. It's not really working out. But another thing is the string is too stiff for too high a percentage of the travel of the string. So this is something that almost nobody ever talks about, but it's really important if you want the guitar to ring out and tune well and all that kind of stuff. So with heavy strings, the distance from the nut outward is stiffer for longer. And the solve for this is having more scale length, because then the proportion of the vibrating part of the string to the stiff part of the string becomes more equal. But if the string is too stiff, too thick, it is stiffer for a longer distance coming off the bridge before the string is freely able to vibrate. It affects the actual, the tuning of the string over a distance.
Hardware and pickups, can all this be changed with standard guitar parts? There isn't special baritone guitar parts, right?
No. Generally, what the preference is for guitars is like baritone guitar pickups, let's say, is kind of a classic pickup. A PAF or a what is the J&B, the Seymour Duncan J&B, that sort of a pickup, sort of mid-hot kind of tone, really favorable in the mids, kind of a roll-off on the low end, a slight roll-off on the low end. There's this misnomer that with these low tunings that you want a lot of bass, and that's actually bass generally, unless you want to do a double duty thing, and you're like, I'm going to use a bass 6 as a bass and a guitar. Generally for baritone guitars, if you want to do a guitar thing, you're not looking for bass or subs or whatever. Generally, you're looking for darkness. It's like you want a greater range of dark notes, and you still want that brightness, the upper mids, the richness of the guitar so that it rings out and all that kind of stuff. So
still want it to sound like a guitar.
Yeah.
But, half an octave lower.
Yeah. Just in a different with a different voice and a different texture. And
you play it differently.
Yeah.
Because of the thick strings and the different tuning.
Wide intervals are very favorable on baritone guitars. A lot of strings.
The thicker the strings, the harder it is to play chords.
Yeah.
Did you say?
Yeah. Well, the chords don't really voice. The chords kind of muddy up when the strings are too thick. So this is one of the things, if you have enough scale length and you can get the actual string gauge down, like light enough for the tuning that you desire. So on your Telecaster, you have 27 inches in scale, and you're tuned to a drop A. You might need to keep 68 on the low side, but the rest of the strings can probably be a lot lighter. And you'll get, a lot of the chord voicings back, and also the playability. It'll just, you'll be able to move around the neck a lot more. You can try just getting the baritone light set.
I might try like a 60 set.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Go down a lot, and I think you can do it. Because I used to, back in the day on 25.5s, I used to use just a 12 set. I think 12 to 60 or 12 to 58, something like that, to tune to B. There weren't very many options. And it was a bit
I used
floppy.
to use the Not Even Slinky, which I don't even think are made anymore.
Right.
They were 12 to 56. And on a standard 6-string, that is too thick for me.
Yeah.
I just don't like it anymore. Especially it had a plain 24 gauge string.
Yeah.
The third.
Those are so dead sounding.
they just never sound in tune.
Yeah. Yeah, you need a wound third.
I'm much happier with thin strings.
Yeah.
Lighter strings on my electrics.
Yeah.
And I want something that's a little bit closer to that for the baritone.
Yeah.
So if you've got a guitar you like, but you want to change the sound, you can do the standard electric guitar upgrades thing. Like you can change the nut, you can change the bridge, you can change the pickups, add in different capacitors for a treble bleed.
Yep.
Any of those sort of upgrades are available. You could put in the active preamps and things like that as well.
Yeah.
So I've got a Telecaster, so I'm thinking I could probably swap out the bridge for a different bridge.
Yep.
I assume the string spacing is all the same, and it should line up with the through-hole body.
There's going to be a string spacing that is specific to Telecasters, and that's really all you have to, or that range of Telecasters. Sometimes it's a little bit different from the Asian-made ones to the USA ones. I'm not sure where that's at right now. In the past, that was a big thing. Anything made in Asia or Mexico was quite a bit different than stuff that was made in USA. But the world might be getting smaller in terms of like its specifications in those ways.
Yeah.
So double check.
I'll probably keep the pickups. I think I like the pickups in it already. They're kind of like above the standard sort of squired deal.
Yeah.
And but the bridge, it's kind of like the vintage style, so it doesn't have compensated saddles.
Right.
So I'm gonna change it to completely separate, like a separate saddle per string.
Right.
It says it already has a bone nut, so I guess I don't need to upgrade that.
That's a nice feature. It's not very vegan, but I am a vegetarian, and I had a bone nut installed on this guitar. This is a Ibanez 28-inch scale baritone. I have it tuned to G, and I changed the pickups. It came stock with EMGs, and I just put regular Seymour Duncan distortion and jazz in the neck.
You don't need anything like a 7-string pickup that's not going to fit for a. I mean, the pull pieces will be in the wrong position.
Yeah, well,
you do that.
This is so Ibanez is F spaced, which I think is Fender spacing. I'm not exactly sure where the F comes from, but they call it F spaced. It's different than Gibson spacing. This is an F spaced bridge, but I had to get a Trembucker spaced pickup from Seymour Duncan because they don't make F spaced specifically, and Trembucker is a little bit narrower. So the pole pieces don't perfectly line up, but I don't notice any problems with it. But yeah, there's a lot of details, regular, just everyday guitar details to concern yourself with. And they all apply in terms of going down this baritone road, unless you get into something that's weird, like this SRC6, which is a weird crossover.
It's got a weird,
Yeah,
yeah,
it even has
weird bridge,
bass keys on it.
but they look like miniature.
Yeah, they're ultralight.
I think they're smaller than what I had on my sound gear, and then the pickups are kind of weird.
Yeah, they're bass
Between
soap bars.
Yeah, but probably narrower.
No, they're just regular bass soap bars.
Okay.
And you can use, I think the 7-string soap bar pickups actually fit. So if you want to go with a more guitar-specific retrofit in that guitar, a guitar voiced, you could do that. The bridge is just a regular Ibanez tight end bridge, which is a guitar bridge. It's proprietary.
Is there any upgrades you would do to pretty much any guitar?
It used to be that I would always change the pickup no matter what, and usually to a Duncan distortion in the bridge or a DiMarzio Jake Bowens, the Periphery guy. I'm not a Periphery fan or anything. I don't have a problem with them either. I just I'm indifferent about Periphery, but that guy has like a nice pickup. The Titan, the DiMarzio Titans are really, really nice. They are like recording ready sound. Very aggressive as well in terms of the things that I do, even for
and you never play clean, so
exactly. Yeah.
That's the sort of
who
thing.
does. What crazy person plays clean? Like, come on. Yeah.
Processing. I've been having a lot of fun playing my baritone through the MXR Bass DI Plus M80.
Yep.
The distortion on that.
Yeah.
So bass distortion on a guitar.
Yep. And you're going into that Ampeg.
Yeah, the Ampeg SVT VR plugin, and gain all the way up, boosted with all the EQ up.
Yeah.
I think it's a great sound.
What's really cool about that tone, what I was following, what you were messing with the other day, what was maybe a week ago or something like that?
In the Kurt Ballou signature drums video.
That's right. The tones that you were getting there using the bass amps and all that stuff. The thing that's interesting about that is they're actually like really low gain. Like even though everything's maxed, it's still like pretty low gain, which is very favorable for the baritone thing to get the clarity. You're still getting the breakup and all that kind of stuff, but the overall tone is holding together because there isn't. It's not mushing out.
It's kind of right. It's not like a high gain amp. It's a tube amp with a ton of headroom, pushed to its limit, breaks up in a much nicer way, and I'm surprised that's not seen that much anymore. And for the past month or so, since I've discovered that trick, like everything, I'm always going through that, and it's just my favorite amp now.
Yeah,
Ampeg SVT tube plugin.
Yeah,
it's great.
I like ever since I saw that, I've been playing a lot more with the bass amps that are in the Helix system, because Yamaha owns Line 6 and Ampeg. So all of the Ampeg models in the Helix system are like legit. Apparently, I don't know how much more legit one person's model is over another, but they sound authentic enough to me. And yeah, I'm like, how did I never really try this before?
Right. You always go towards like a dual rectifier sort of tone?
These days, the Rev.
Okay.
Rev Red or Rev Purple, Canadian homies, which is nice.
It's like a high gain kind of grindy metal.
Yeah, I use it with the gain set to 0, but and I push it with an overdrive.
Okay.
Like no gain on the overdrive, just level. I like that tone. But yeah, I get something similar to that a little bit more easily fooling around with some of these bass amps now. And I'm like, oh, how did I? And there's a thickness to the bass amps that some of them work better than others, but there's this thickness in the tone. It's not like bass. It's just this. I don't know, this kind of girth or size to the sonics of it.
And I find that the bass cabinets often have a more interesting texture,
Yeah.
sort of.
They can be
Than
really
guitars.
dark, but yeah, they're very different than guitar cabinets for sure.
Yeah.
An easy way.
Sometimes they're really scooped sounding.
Yeah.
Like the highs are kind of shrill.
Yeah. A lot of those Ampeg, classic Ampeg 810 is a very, very scooped sounding cab
Mhm.
with almost no high end because there's no tweeter or anything in that. I don't like the tweeter sound personally, but yeah, the bass amp trick. It's a nice one. Thank you, John.
Yeah. You're welcome.
And not, for folks out there, the bass amp trick is not for more bass. It's actually for tighter clarity. It has nothing to do with, making it more bassy or better bottom end response or anything like that. It's just a tighter, strangely bigger sound sometimes. When I first got into this baritone thing, I didn't know, I didn't even know what it was. I had a guitar teacher and I was trying to do this lower stuff and he had a 7 string and I'm like, oh, I want a 7 string. He's like, honestly, if you can find one, get a baritone. But this was at a time before everyone was building them. ESP was the only company making 27-inch scale baritones on the regular at that time. And but I was stubborn and I got an Ibanez RGD 7 string, which is a little bit longer scale, but I was like, I got it home and I'm like, oh, this is not at all anything I'm interested in. And for some reason, there's this thing with like 7 strings and 8 strings. I don't have any problem. I don't have a thing against them or against people who play them or anything like that. But it's always been, for me, it's this sort of rollerblades versus skateboards kind of scenario, and the 6 strings are skateboards and the 7 strings are rollerblades. And I don't want to go rollerblading. And there's a lot of really good rollerbladers. There's nothing wrong with it. But
Well, for me it's the neck. It's always so like thin and wide.
right.
Um
Yeah, I don't like
I
the way it
just
plays at all.
yeah, I get lost on it. So I've never really been a fan of playing 7 strings, even though I like that the low B. That's even the low B is a little too floppy sometimes. Can't go below that.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's
just the
just a regular guitar
interval is
usually, right?
yeah, yeah,
With a bigger
maybe
string.
slightly longer.
Sometimes, yeah, the RGD was 26.5, and regular RGs are 25.5. And this actually before this Ibanez RGIB 6, which is 28 inches in scale, there was a Mike Mashak Ibanez signature, which was their first 28-inch scale uh, baritone guitar. That was their first foray into that, and ever since they've had this RGIB type of series going.
Like when I was in high school, I would read Guitar World magazine like every month.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever seeing baritone mentioned.
No, I think it's got to do with exactly what you're talking about. Magazine, right? Media, news. So reading the magazines, it's a story to talk about an extra string. It's a story and you can see it. With a baritone, it's more of a concept and you can't really see it. The average person isn't going to notice that it's longer. They're like, huh? I don't get it. And what is that's not really a dramatic story. But adding a string or adding 2 strings, whew, that is a media cycle. It's a media frenzy.
If you have the opportunity, if you haven't played a baritone yet, try it. It's different and you'll like it.
Yeah.
You'll probably like it.
How are you getting along with yours? Like, how are you applying yourself to the instrument that is maybe obviously different than before? Are you playing a lot more arpeggios, a lot more open strings, a lot more single notes?
I'm playing drop D single finger chords. And would say the intonation's fine on it. The action is a little too high,
Right.
and I think that's because the strings are a little bit higher than I like. And so there's a bit of a playability issue, and it needs a proper setup. And I've been trying to make small adjustments to it, but ultimately, like, it needs some fret work
Right.
as well. So it's not ideal, but the first day I had it, I probably played 5 hours on it,
Amazing.
just
Yeah.
just getting used to it and having fun with it. Especially going from light strings for a couple months to this, it's like, wow, this is totally different.
Yeah.
But it's nothing like my bass,
Right.
and it's not an octave lower, but it feels like it's so much deeper. The tone is just drastically different
Yeah.
that you get from it, and it's still guitar-like, and it's still Telecaster-like. It's twangy.
Yeah.
But it's like such thick strings. It's very interesting.
Yeah. I think you're going to enjoy lighter strings on that guitar.
Yeah.
Especially in B or A, it's not super low, so you don't have to worry about it getting too floppy. It should be floppy enough that you can bend freely, without too much effort.
So that's it for this episode of the Home Recording Show. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you want to support the show, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/HRS podcast. For a $5 donation, you get your name at the end of the show. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.